But it is time for us to hit social media for our cash tag segment. For that, we'd like to welcome in Landon Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio.com. Good morning to you, Landon. And we also have Jenny Horn alongside us as well. We're going to be talking some Salesforce.
Salesforce ahead of their earnings post-market today. So they're down, of course, with the broader market sell-off today about 1%, but they are up 19% in the last year. So this is a company, this is a very interesting statistic I thought, they've beaten on every earnings in history. So they essentially have a flawless earnings history, which is pretty rare if you think about it. This is kind of the M&A empire. I mean, when it comes to M&As, Salesforce, I think, could write a book about how to do successful M&As because it seems like that's kind of their go-to. And the most interesting thing of their earnings, I believe, in this quarter will be the sale or the purchase of Tableau. So they bought that last year for $15.7 billion. And I think investors are going to be really eager to see how this will, the synergies between the two, because this was such a huge sale. Of course, M&As are kind of their thing, but this is kind of one of the biggest ones. So that actually goes into our first tweet, which says, I fully expect significant Tableau coverage during today's Salesforce earnings call. A lot of enterprises I work with are users, but Microsoft is aggressively pushing Power BI. So, Landon, I was really curious when it comes to the purchase of Tableau. Have you seen this affect consumer happiness at all, or purchase intent data?
Yeah, I tell you what, when it comes to happiness, Salesforce is off the charts. It is one of, it may be our happiest customer base that we track. It's at 92% positive. I think the lowest it's ever been since 2012 was 85. It's absolutely insane how happy the customers are of Salesforce. So that is obviously driving growth. People stick around. They continue to use it a long time after they first sign up. And when we look at purchase intent, it is killing it as well. So they're at basically all-time highs. The stock is just off all-time highs, selling off with the broader market, as you mentioned, just about 10 points off those all-time highs. But purchase intent continues to be up and to the right. Very attractive chart on purchase intent. And like you said, they beat every time. I don't think I'd like to play golf with whoever's writing those estimates, because I think they're probably a sandbagger. And the thing is that they're expected to beat. So, we've got them coming in at about plus 44% year over year on purchase intent. Revenue expectations are about plus 32% year over year. So we think they'll beat again this year, but I think everybody expects them to beat this quarter. And so what's that actually going to translate into as far as market reaction? That's the question.
Landon, you read my mind when you talked about maybe they're sandbagging on the earnings, because no one hits every single time and beat in the history. But let's go on to another subject. This is a company heavily involved in the cloud. You look, cloud-based CRM software or cloud software is 95% of this company. So tell us, how does your data show up with what seems to be the absolute focus of their business, which is the cloud, AI, all these things that are so popular in today's new economy?
Right. I mean, you're just listing off buzzwords, right? This is how you get investors to invest in your company. If you're a new company, VCs love those kind of words, and Salesforce is actually executing on them. That's the thing. And what's interesting about this company, generally speaking, LikeFolio covers very consumer-facing companies, and we don't really get into B2B type companies. Salesforce is an exception to that rule. It's been one that we've been extremely predictive at, and we've got a lot of people talking about using it, because it's not just the CEO or the sales manager making the business decision. It's the users under that person that are actually talking about it, and they're using it in their daily life. And Salesforce does a really good job of integrating all of the data from a lot of different sources. So you've got one place to look at your customer base, what they're doing, what their actions they're taking, and what are the best ways to get them to either convert for the sale or renew for another cycle.
Yeah, and Lynn, I think this is one of the most accurately symbolized companies of all the different ones, in terms of CRM being the stock ticker for this one, because this is really what this company is. Obviously, it's expanded, and the acquisition of Tableau is going to give them another way of kind of providing more and more to these different businesses. But this is a company that helps different corporations and small businesses around the world basically aggregate their consumer data to help the different people provide better sales and more accurate information and keep track of everything. So when you see, like you said, you don't typically track this kind of stuff, but you track this company and you see how happy their users are. This is clearly the number one player in this space. Is there anybody even close in second or third?
Not really. Not, I don't think in the publicly traded. But I can say that, yeah, happiness is going to translate long term for these guys. That's very important. And we've got, like I said, purchase intent at all-time highs. They're beating every quarter, so expectations are high. I think their PE ratio is over 200. So this is a very high, a lot of growth is priced into this. If they ever do miss, I think it could be disastrous, because then all of a sudden that multiple gets multiplied on the way down. But we've got them, air quotes, beating again this quarter. But we're more than that, I think we're very bullish on them long term. The short term, I think it's going to come down to market expectations versus actual expectations. But long term, we're very bullish. So if they do pull back, or maybe the market gets them to pull back because there's a lot of trouble overall, then I think it's a good entry longer term. For the short term, we're definitely playing the earnings bullish, but we're not as convinced as we are for the long term, which is extremely nice looking.
Yeah, Landon, you mentioned your market outlook amid, of course, all these different headwinds we're seeing. So that actually goes perfectly into my next tweet, which says, Salesforce, despite the damage seen in 99% of the market today, this name's down a lot less than some other names as we approach earnings. Selectively bullish, but hedged. So this actually kind of goes right into exactly what you were saying. But we have to consider, of course, today's market landscape does matter. So even though this company has, of course, a flawless earnings history, I mean, what do you think for this earnings play specifically? You think bullish, but does this broader market itself impact your opinion at all?
Yeah, I think that you've got to be just a little bit hesitant on any kind of bullish earnings play just because of what the market's doing. You can get it right, even if a company is not the sandbagging type like Salesforce, you could get a call right. They could beat, and if the market's down 1 or 2% that day, it's going to make it tough to make money on that trade. So you just got to be smart. You got to have your positions balanced and be very aware of what your overall market exposure is. But if you're going to pick winners, it's always nice to pick one that is at the top of its class and has a fantastic bullish outlook long term. I'd rather be long something like that going into an iffy market than something that's kind of more of a gamble. So we love Salesforce here. I do kind of like that it's $10 off its all-time highs, which it made just last week. So it's a little bit on sale, and that's all due to the broader markets. So maybe a nice little beat here could get things to come back up. But worst case scenario, if I'm trading this on earnings and I'm forced into a longer term position, I'm very comfortable holding Salesforce long term.
Yeah, the one thing I did notice, Landon, is that a quarter ago, with a 6-cent beat on earnings, 75 cents versus 69, stock actually sold off. But then it formed a base and then rallied pretty hard off that. But for a day or two, you had a pretty nice downtrade in Salesforce there. So, that should at least come into play with what the strategies that we're going to use.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, it's the sandbagging golfer. You're not surprised when he shoots a net 65 because that's what he does. That's Salesforce here. So they're going to beat every single time. And like you said, last time they did, and I think the stock sold off like 2% that day. Mm-hmm. So it could happen again. You could beat and get a sell-off with a company that always beats. And so just be aware of that, and obviously be aware of the market conditions, because this is a tough trading environment.
So Landon, last thought here on this one is, obviously we know there's macro volatility right now, so it's tough to kind of just play around these earnings releases. But when you have a stock like Salesforce that you clearly like longer term, do you use these potentially volatile situations and earnings releases that could lead to a sell-off to accumulate these shares if it does sell off?
Yeah, so, this is a personal strategy. This isn't LikeFolio's official position. But in a case like this where implied volatility is a little bit higher, I like to sell puts. And then, I'm essentially buying shares if it goes against me, and I like the position long term. And I'm taking advantage of that implied volatility in the near term. So that's generally going to be my strategy on a company that I don't mind owning for, 6 months, 12 months, that kind of thing, and maybe take advantage of a little bit higher options prices there.
Well said, Landon, and we'll take a look at that in just a little bit. But thanks, as always, for joining us, and thanks to Jenny as well.